Wait, you think you have an interesting real estate story? You've got to hear from our next guest, Mike Sgandurra. Has the ATF called you and said they caught somebody trying to blow up your investment? Yeah, well, that's only a part of his story. He walks us through his real estate journey, and you'd think, given the stories that he has to tell, that he would quit, but he didn't. Please join us on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where I, Erik Stenbakken, and Kristi Kandel interview Mike Sgandurra, where he tells his story that you've just got to hear for yourself. Can't wait for you to join us. Hey, welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. My name is Erik Stenbakken, and I've invested in real estate since 2010, and not everything has been sunshine and roses. Joining me is my co-host, Kristi Kandel. Kristi, what's up?
Hey, my name's Kristi Kandel, and I'm a real estate developer, investor, and today I teach and mentor people how to become developers in their own backyard. And today I'm especially excited because we have a friend of mine, a guest, Mike Sgandurra, who is here from Reno, Nevada. And I actually met him, and Mike, I'll let you tell the story, but it was because you were willing to engage people and reach out and to make other real estate connections. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike Sgandurra. I'm a real estate investor by morning, evenings, and weekends. And I've worked a regular 9-to-5 W-2 job. Yeah, so I met Kristi in 2021, actually, shortly after I'd moved out to Reno. I was fairly active on the Bigger Pockets platform. I'd seen something where she had posted and saying she was kind of in the Reno area, but had some ties to where I was from in Ohio. So I messaged her, and probably about a week or so later, we had our first ever meetup walking date along the shores of Lake Tahoe, talking real estate.
Yeah, I figured it was safe to meet a random internet stranger by making sure my dog was with me so she could eat him if he was a stranger, or we could get a good exercise and workout in. And turns out, a couple years later, Mike is a really good friend. We talk all the time about business, about real estate, about life. And actually last night we were just texting because, Mike, what happened in your world?
Yeah, so this is the closest I've ever come to somebody who has an actual Reno 911. I don't know if this is a Reno 911, but what the heck happened? Because it sounds unbelievable, but this is not fiction.
Yeah, so yesterday I'm in a couple meetings for work, and out of nowhere I start getting these phone calls, like just rapid succession, these numbers I don't know, one after the other after the other. What is going on? And I get this text right after. And it says, Michael, this is Detective so-and-so down in Las Vegas. Please call me regarding your Tesla Cybertruck. And as soon as I get that, oh man, this can only mean one thing. And in light of all that's happening right now with the political environment and some of the protests, I called a detective, and sure enough, there was someone who had gone around my truck there. So I rented out on Turo down in the Las Vegas metro area.
Wait, you're car hacking?
I am car
Explain
hacking.
that real quick.
Yeah. What is Turo and what are you doing there?
Yeah, so great question. So Turo, much like many of you know with real estate house hacking, is basically just renting out something that you own and or sometimes use. So for me, I purchased one of the first ever Cybertrucks that came out a little over a year ago. I have only driven it like a week and a half that I've owned it. I've actually kept it down in Vegas where it has been consistently rented out. And basically, I'm just having someone else just pay off the asset for me. And at the end of the day, I should own a really cool piece of EV history for little to no money out of pocket.
So what happened?
So after I get off the phone with this ATF agent, he explains to me that, the truck was at a gas station and there was a suspicious individual who was kind of walking around it for a while with some sort of accelerant who, apparently may have had a vendetta against Teslas or the current administration, something like that, right? So he says, FBI, ATF, local PD, we're all here right now. We've got the truck cordoned off. We need your permission to go in the truck and basically pull the video off of the hard drive so we have some evidence to arrest the perpetrator, because right now he's just detained, but we actually need something harder to go off of. The Attorney General has directed us to be very strict on these things and takes these very seriously. So gave him permission to go in. And from everything I can tell right now, I guess the suspect was apprehended, still detained. I don't know too many other details. It is considered an active crime scene and active investigation. So more details to come on that. But that was definitely one of the more exciting things yesterday. And you hear about these things and think, oh, this can't happen to me. Like, I'm insulated from it. The media is overblowing it, but I am living proof that it very nearly could have happened yesterday to me.
Man, I'm glad it didn't, but you've got a heck of a story now. I mean, you got that. And I think there's a lot in here. One is that things do happen. We were joking before we rolled the interview here, is that real estate investors are like, well, my toilet's not going to back up. It's like, no, but maybe someone will try to blow it up, right? If it's not one thing, it's something else. And if you've been in real estate long enough, you're going to have your own story of, you got to be kidding me. Like, who does that? And you'll find out who does that. They're other people. Crazy stuff. Before we get into the real estate, though, Mike, I am interested because my son's obsessed with the idea of living in Australia. It sounds like you did it for a little bit. What was that about?
Yeah, so that's also an interesting story. So a few years back, it was 2017, I was living down in New Orleans. It's my day off work, and the plant manager calls me out of the blue. And I was like going for a run at the park. And he goes, "Hey, Mike." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Hey, I got a question, and I need an answer within the next couple hours." I was like, "Okay." He's like, one of our factories in Australia, they need some extra help basically with their grain harvest for the year. He's like, "I don't know which factory. I don't know exactly what you'd be doing. I don't know where it is. I don't know how long you'll be there, but I need to know by tonight if you can do it."
You're like, good thing I'm running right now because now I can think through this.
Yeah, I was like, let me run back home and start packing my bags. So I make a couple calls. I have like a wedding in a week. I had a rowing event right after that. So I kind of lined everything up. And yeah, a few weeks later, I was on a plane doing an expat assignment, working kind of like an hour outside of Adelaide, Australia for the next few months in 2017 and 2018. Unbelievable experience. I'll never forget it. It was one of the best times of my life. I think Australia is a must-see place for anyone. The lifestyle is just incredible. The people are so kind. The weather is beautiful. They've really got it figured out there. It's amazing.
So this is a telling story about kind of your willingness to jump, right? To go for it. And let's move into your real estate. Just in a nutshell, a 30-second overview. What's your general portfolio diversity look like right now?
Yeah, so right now a portfolio consists of 14 doors. So I own 2 duplexes by myself and an LLC. That's just me. I've got 6 single family homes with a partner of mine, and then I operate 4 Airbnbs here in the Reno market.
Okay, so you must have had parents who taught you this at a young age, right? I mean, you must have been mentored by family and brought up into this because, I mean, to get into this, you've got to have a full-time job in real estate. You got to have true or not true?
Not true. Very not true.
Okay, take us through this. I mean, how do you go from where you were, not true, so kind of tell us what that is, to how did you make the jump? Like, you were an early adopter with the Tesla Cybertruck, which I think is a genius. Did I look at those trucks and go, wow, I want one? No, I didn't. But you saw the opportunity, not because of anything political. This predated that. I just I'm a Toyota guy, right? But I didn't see the potential in renting that on Turo as an early adopter, having a novelty like that. I didn't see that. My eyes just didn't see that, but you did. How did you see the potential in real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So going back to 2019, I had just taken a new job and I had been frugal. I've been a saver ever since I was a kid, but knew nothing about real estate at all. Nobody in my family has done anything in any capacity in real estate, especially with investments. I remember, okay, now that I'm getting this new job, I'm going to be here for a little bit. I should probably buy a home. So I remember Googling, what do I need to do to buy a home? I had absolutely no idea at all. And over the next few months, reading a bunch of internet pages and listening to YouTube videos that I later figured out was Brandon Turner and Bigger Pockets, I somehow connected the dots of okay, these are the steps that you buy a home. And not only that, you can actually make money in real estate by renting out a home. And as silly as that may sound on this podcast, at that time, the mere thought of it had never even crossed my mind, never once. And I was like, wow, this is cool. So then I just did a Zillow search for homes in New Orleans, got connected with a realtor. I was like, this will work. So, someone calls you within 5 seconds. You want to be my realtor? Sure, let's do it. So a little haphazard, but it worked no less. And um, at that point, he's like, yeah, you should buy a duplex, get 2 homes, and you can have income with it. So fast forward, I bought a home a few months later, and I ended up getting a duplex where I house hacked on one side. So each side was a 3-bed, 1-bath. I house hacked the other two bedrooms on my side, and then turned the other side into an Airbnb. And so I got that up and running within a couple months of buying the home, and did that for about 4 months until COVID hit. And then from there, I had to make a nice pivot once I lost 15,000 on bookings in about 2 or 3 days.
That was a terrifying time for us too. And the other people that I knew who were in vacation rentals were like, well, I guess we give our houses back to the bank. A friend of mine owned on the Outer Banks, and he said for him, what looked like he was going to lose he had an 8-bedroom, 8-bathroom property on the beach. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to give it back to the bank. And then by the end of the year, he's like, well, that turned out to be the best year in my rental history.
Right.
And so this is, it's an unpredictable market. To some degree, you've got to have some risk tolerance. I love your story because it is not the story of I perseverated on the analysis for 6 years and then no, you're like, okay, I did. Look, basically I hired a Zillow agent for my first purchase of a short-term rental. And now that I'm a licensed broker associate, I know that agent should have been reported to the real estate commission. It's like, oh my word, some of the egregious, stupid, probably, well, certainly unprofessional things that they did. But guess what? I still got a house, right? And you went in and you did this and you kind of caught the bug and you worked to scale. And I know one of the things is long distance investing. It's like, oh, there's house hacking. You could do this. There's short-term rentals. There's long-term rentals. And then it's like, hey, we can buy out of state. I've got David Green's book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, which I recommend to people. And I've done it. And if you listen to the podcast in the past, you've heard my story of how to lose $500,000 on one door. It sometimes goes sideways. I think you've got a story about out-of-state renovation and so on. Are you willing to take us through that? Well, I know you are. I'm just going to say, take us through that because we never get our guests on here and then just like, surprise. But Mike's been good enough. Take us through kind of what was it that you had in mind of what you wanted to do? And then how did that unfold?
Yes. During COVID, when nobody was doing anything, I was getting more and more into the bigger pockets. And I read Long Distance Real Estate Investing. I read everything by Brandon Turner, right? And I started, I was still like saving up some money from my regular job. I was like, I want to do this like real estate thing more. Like this sounds amazing. So they say, go to where you have a competitive advantage, right? And for me, that's Columbus, Ohio, where I was born and raised. So at the time, it was 1,000 miles from where I lived, but I didn't care because I knew the market like the back of my hand. So started looking for homes there, got connected with an agent, also through the Bigger Pockets platform, and was putting in offers on homes, everything like that. So finally get into contract on one, offers accepted. It's a 2-bed, 1-bath duplex on each side, 2,400 square feet. Get it locked up for $100,000. It's going to need at least $100,000 in work. And here's, I sound crazy hearing myself say that because the very first investment property I ever bought, I put more money in it than the purchase price of the home. So I'm getting contractor bids. I'm speaking with property managers, project managers, everybody. And the best option at that time was actually a contractor that the property manager has hired for other jobs in the past. So I fly up, I go meet this guy, I have lunch with him in person, as well as the project manager who works for the property manager. And I'm like, this is great. We get a contract. They say, hey, this work is going to take 2 to 3 months. There is a clause in here where if it's not done in time, I think you'll get like $25 or $50 a day in kind of like late fees from the contractor. They showed pictures of previous jobs that they'd done that, I was looking at the addresses on Google Maps, all this stuff. So I closed on the home almost 4 years ago today to the day, and they get started immediately. things are going great. There's new siding, everything like that. It's all coming together in the first couple of weeks. And
And are you at this
very,
point, are you managing it remotely? So you flew out, you met with the contractor. Did you go back to Reno and now you're just getting progress photos, emails, something like that?
yeah, exactly. So the project manager was basically, yeah, just sending me like weekly updates, pictures, texts, emails, whatever. But yeah, this whole time I'm doing it remotely. I was actually transitioning from living in New Orleans to moving out to Reno. So going even further away from the property, and things, you start to notice kind of some of the cracks, right? Oh, this will be done in a week or two, but then a week or two comes, it's not done. So things start getting like pretty bad. So I actually book a flight out there a couple months later in August of 2021. I go see the property again. I think that was when I still remember the feeling of walking the property and just you just feel your heart just sink because you're like, this is not what the book told me.
And did you know that it wouldn't be what you would expect, or were you hoping that it was where you thought it was?
I was hoping it would be further along. I was hoping maybe I just had a misunderstanding of the progress. The project manager was still being very optimistic. Oh yeah, we're only a couple weeks behind. The contractor even met us there. Oh yeah, I've just had trouble getting guys. I got 2 new guys starting on Monday. Hearing that whole thing. So then, over the next few months, probably the next 6 months, continued just dragging along over and over and over with the rehab. It felt like it was a new subcontractor every week, no real progress update photos. It was bad, right? And during all of this, I was actually working my new role in Reno. I was actually working night shift in a manufacturing environment. So I'm doing all this while sleeping during, the rest of the world's waking hours, and I'm 3 hours behind them too. So any communication basically required me to run on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I'd wake up, see what's going on with the guys or with the house, and then try to go back to bed for maybe an hour or something like that before going to the factory. So looking back, that was crazy.
Insanity, some might say. The things we do
For
for
sure.
real estate.
So,
It
Mike,
is.
what was the goal of this house? $100,000 renovation on $100,000 property is a lot. So, just take a minute and kind of walk us through how is that financed, and what does it mean when you're purchasing a place, but then you renovate it,
Mm-hmm.
and how do the finances work while you're doing that? Because there's more than one way that can unfold. What was going on with that? What was the objective? Like, this is what we want when we're done. And how was that financed, and how did that look during this time?
Yeah. Good questions. In some of Brandon Turner's books and David Green's book, they say, if you can, add bedrooms and bathrooms. So I knew that in a 2,400 square foot home, 1,200 on each side, I knew I could turn a 2-1 into a 3-2. So a lot of the cost was coming with adding the bedrooms, framing out bedrooms, redoing kitchens, all that stuff. To finance the home, I actually put 25% down. I found a lender who would actually do a conventional mortgage. It somehow barely qualified for conventional. I still don't know how. I don't want to know how. So I did that. And then to finance the rehab, I actually sold part of my 401k, and then I took out a loan against my existing primary residence. So, it was borderline over leveraged, but also kind of calculated risk of I have a really good idea with how this house will be worth when it's done after I burr it and refinance it. And I've got a good idea for what it can rent for as a 3-2. So long term, I feel pretty good about this. Eventually, when the home was done, and I can talk about the rest of the rehab process, but it ended up appraising for 260. So I bought it for 100. I ended up putting about 130 in it. It appraised for 260. So I made 30 grand. I lost a few hairs on my head and a lot of hours of sleep. That home is actually, to this very day, kind of still a money drain for me. I've been in the red every year. I've put about $20,000 in additional repairs into the home, including all new flooring again, because that was installed poorly. I just got a call on Monday, 2 days ago, that the cabinets had collapsed in the kitchen. And then the handle on the faucet, I got an email about 9 o'clock last night. The handle on the kitchen faucet had come off. So there's still ongoing problems to this house. It's much more stabilized now than it was then, but I'll hold on to the asset. I plan to hold on to it with the loan because I do have good debt locked up on it right now. So it's on a 5/1 arm. That may change in a few years, depending on interest rates, but kind of the debt right now is the asset.
Okay. There's a lot going on in that story, in that picture. This is the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, and I don't think I need to ask anything about what might be the downside to this. You spelled it out pretty graphically here, and this happens, right? The reality is this happens, and if you're a listener out there and you're like, man, I thought I was the only one with problems with contractors not doing what they said they were going to do, or I paid them $10,000 to do this thing, and I come back, I'm like, and there's one little bag of Home Depot parts, and they're gone. Like, what the heck? This is not just you. Like, this is a real issue. What kind of takeaways? What kind of lessons? What kind of like, hey, here's a cautionary tale about how maybe I would do it differently, and heads up for you. What are some of those takeaways that now that you're mostly through this project, and kitchen sinks, faucets, that happens, right? I mean, I don't think I've ever had a property where the faucets don't go bad, including the one in my own house right here. But what kind of takeaways would you have strategically or technically when you think of a project like this?
Yeah, so I think one of the takeaways was, one, nobody is going to care about your home as much as you do. And you have to be willing to understand and accept that. No matter how many times you talk to a contractor, no matter how much love you want to kind of pour into the project, to them it's just a job, it's a paycheck, right? So having good management on them I think another big one is.
Well, stop right there. What does good management look like on a project like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So good management to me is direct communication with the contractor. In my situation, even though I paid a project manager, I had to pay the property manager all of the money ahead of time for the rehab. So not only was I not communicating directly with the contractor, but the property manager was dictating when the draws would get paid to the contractor as opposed to me, right? So I lost that element of control. And so now I lose all my leverage as well.
And you had chosen to do that because the property management company has a construction arm, and they brought that in. I've actually used this company for a kitchen remodel, I think, and they require the full money in, and they almost act like the bank, who's then will give the draws. So in theory, when the company who's managing it has great reviews, but still no one cares as much as you do.
Yeah. And you learn that the hard way. And, even with good management, even with every control that you can think of, there's still the human element that you cannot control. And so it's inevitable that there is a component of risk that you have to be willing to accept, right? And if you're not willing to accept that, this might not be the best avenue for you. But that said, so things I did in the future. So one, every project since, I've paid the contractor directly. I control and handle the finances. Number two, we vetted them more for other projects that they have done. Three, we don't pay draws until we know for sure with proof that the work that was paid for in advance is complete, or the materials are purchased, or whatever. With the past project, so it went so far over that the previous contractor, I think he owed me something like $8,000 in late fees. The guy skipped out of town. He hasn't done any more work for this property manager, never to be heard from again. So I am still owed that money. The property manager called me. They apologized for the quality of the work as well as the timeline of the work. They did give me some breaks, and they had told me that there were other people where this guy was hired to do work and he did nothing. So I actually came out better than some of the other people because even though my quality of work was awful, at least something was done.
Right.
And so for that, I am grateful. But yeah, it's just a tale of, a contractor gone awry and rogue. I think bankrupt as well, from my understanding. And he has no assets to go after. There's So you can put a lien on them, but it won't do any good.
And I think that this is a moment to mention a sad reality, is that if you as an investor operate with integrity and you follow up and keep your word, there's an assumption that surely other people will do this too. And this is simply not true. For whatever reasons, don't have to make excuses or condemn folks, but the fact is that what Mike is saying here is absolutely true, and I can attest to this as well, is that there are people who simply do not care. They will go out of business. They can stack up a bunch of lawsuits against them and then do whatever they do next, right? And your job as the investor, you can only control your end of the deal, right? And so coming up with as many, there are risks, but doing as many risk mitigation steps as you can. And I believe the number one thing is the money. It is the money, because that's why they're doing the job. Anyone who's putting in drywall for you is not doing it because they love you. Okay, maybe there's a 1 in a million exceptions there. I don't want to go there, but they're doing it because it's a job, right? And they want the money, and the money is the lever that you have. And if you give that lever to someone else as an intermediary, or if you give that money to the contractor ahead of time, look, I did this. I hired somebody to do some stone work for me, and it turned out it just wasn't getting done. It wasn't getting done. It wasn't getting done. And I had hired somebody other than what my contractor typically used, right? And so my contractor's like, well, I'm not in charge of him. You are. And he said, well, you didn't just pay him ahead of time, did you? It's like, maybe. And fortunately, this guy, and this I think is a key, this guy who did the stonework lived and worked in that town. He had family in that town. He couldn't skip out of town, right? And so when I said, hey, I'm going to show up in town and we're going to talk, he's like, just coincidentally, your stonework will be done tomorrow. This will be a good chance for you to see it. I'm like, that's awesome. Let's take a look at that finished stonework, shall we? And I show up and do this. But I made that mistake. A lot of us have made that mistake, right? Or we pay the money, they say it's done. I have a friend of mine who hired a plumber to put in some external drainage. You know, you've got to have drainage from various appliances that goes outside the house, like a hot water heater and so on like this, right? Well, the plumber took a picture of PVC, and my friend's like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's done. Well, what the plumber had done is taken a picture just of a section of PVC and had never connected it to anything. And, you know, billed my friend who had paid it because there was a picture of it done, right? I'm using air quotes here. The job was done. Well, he hung the PVC. He never connected it to anything. And so you're like, you've got to be kidding me. People would do that? Yes, they will. So there's almost no such thing as too much vetting on did the job get done, you know? And when you turn over that money, your lever is gone. You've let go of the leash, you know? And it's like, well, I had huskies, and I think you had a husky meet. When you let go of the leash on a husky, well, friends, just a word out
Adios.
there. People don't make huskies run. They don't train them to run or force them to run. It's all you can do to keep them from running. They're gone. And if you do that with a contractor, maybe that's a good mental picture for you. It's like, when you let go of that leash, bam, it's gone. Thank you for taking us through that. We appreciate our guests being willing to say, hey, this is what happened when it's sideways, educational, but also inspirational. I mean, surely that's not the only thing that you've done. And if it had only turned out bad, you would have quit, but you didn't. You've had some wins. What are some other things? Because you mentioned a handful of different portfolio assets that you've got. What are some other things that went right?
And also, while you were going through the crazy project, were you actively looking at other real estate? Were you still going forward with other things? Or did you put everything on pause to fix the situation?
Yeah. So during all of this rehab, I mean, I was sold on the idea of real estate investment, and that has not changed since. Like, I'm kind of a math driven person. So like when you start doing the spreadsheets and you do these models, or you just hear someone talk, you're like, okay, I'm in. So for me, I was still looking at deals in real estate. I was still reaching out to as many people as I could, both locally and out of town. I'm a big believer that your net worth is your network, right? So, which is how Kristi and I met. So still furthering my education, you know, every book, every podcast, every blog, anything I could soak up or read or get my hands on, I was all about it. And so So that was in 2021. I purchased another home in 2022, basically right around the time that this home was wrapping up. I did close on another. Funny enough, that one too, I've evicted 2 sets of tenants in a row, lost out on at least 9 months of rental income because of that. But same thing, like the lessons learned, like the money I paid, the money I lost, that was part of my tuition, right? So I got my bachelor's on the first house, I got my master's on the second. But that home too, same thing. It's rehabbed, it's stabilized. And then do you kind of want me to talk a little bit about where I've gone the last year or so and some of the Airbnbs?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, did you
Because you've
quit?
talked about
You're like,
rehabs and long-term rentals, but I know for a fact that you've pivoted into other cool areas too.
Yeah. So uh, we purchased, so my wife and I purchased a home here in Reno a couple years ago when interest rates still started with twos and threes. So a relic of the past at this point. And I knew from my short-term experience that I wanted to get something in Reno where you could actually have an Airbnb unit, right? So got that going very early, about 3 years ago. Early 2022. And same thing, we knew we wanted to start scaling that. You could see the cash flow from that. So for anyone who maybe just wants to get some cash flow, but doesn't necessarily have the 20-25% to put down on a home, a great way to do that requires little to no capital is the Airbnb arbitrage model. Kind of similar to wholesaling in a sense, where you don't need a lot of money to get started, and it's a good way to make money. One is more of a recurring revenue stream, and the other is a one-time. Started reaching out to some other people a couple of years ago to see if they were interested in letting us essentially sublease their home and throw it on some of the short-term platforms. So we've been doing that now for about 3 years, or excuse me, a little over 2 years. That's been great for us. So we've acquired 3 more units just through the arbitrage model. We don't own them. We just pay rent on them. We have a very good relationship with the landlords. We carry additional insurance. Honestly, the homes are in better condition now than they were when we first started renting them. So the landlords really appreciate that. They've got their guaranteed rent coming in every month. And then we keep a little money on the side as well. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. I'm actually doing something right now that I don't know if anyone's done this before, but I actually hired a virtual assistant to go and find every Airbnb that they can where you can see the property address numbers, and then start skip tracing that to find their address. And I'm going to reach out to them and see, hey, are you looking for a co-host? Because there's really no other way. Airbnb protects that quite a bit. So I'll let you know if that was an effective strategy or not. But I will be reaching out and kind of doing a marketing campaign to try to grow the business that way too.
that's cool. I have to say that we kind of got into our first short-term rental by a related way, as I saw the pictures of the listing, and I did a background in commercial and editorial photography, and I looked at their pictures. I'm like, whoever has this listing has pictures in the winter, in the summer, in the daytime, at night, in the fall. Like, they're not hiring a photographer to go up there 6 times a year to get this. I'm like, whoever owns this either is a photographer or knows their best friend is one, and they've got to be local. And so we reached out and we're like, hey, we're thinking about renting your place. We're also real estate investors, and should you ever want to share, what's going on, we'd love to, meet up, which is a delicate thing on those platforms, right? Because the platforms don't want you working around their platform, because the platform fear, just to make it super clear, is they don't want property owner to go straight to renter and cut out the Airbnb or the Vrbo, because they get a commission on connecting you to, right? And that's why they're so fiercely like, nope, you can't call the person, you can't share a phone, you can't, just so you know this, if either one of those parties, the property owner or the renter, the potential renter, puts in a phone number or an email address, or it's all deleted. It's just all blanked out. So what he's doing here sounds like, why would you do that? It's like, because that's what you have to do. Like, it's hard. Now, he's not doing this so that he can rent it or from them with skipping them. He wants to manage it, right? And so you've got to be creative. You got to go like, well, how can we do this? And it ended up, we had dinner with the family. We met them. Actually, they're really good friends of ours now. And now they call us for advice, right? They were the only ones that we personally knew who owned a short-term rental then. And now he calls us because we own 6 or 7 times more than they do. And it's just funny how that works. Now, related to that, talk about willingness, because your story here is really fascinating. because I see repeated kind of a way of going about this, of taking risks calculated, because you've done some due diligence, like you're looking stuff up, you're asking for photos, you're asking for referrals. That doesn't always go well, but you didn't quit, right? And I think this is really important. Annie Duke talks about this in her book, Thinking in Bets, and she calls it resulting. It's when you do the right things, but it ends up with an outcome you don't like. If we say, well, then that's it, I quit, that's resulting. We're saying, then when I do these things, it's just always going to go badly, or it's always going to go well. She's like, you've got to just be honest with yourself and say, some of this is just it's a wild card that gets played on you, and you're like, shoot. And sometimes this is the dangerous part, is that we can get lucky and things can go super well. This is what happened to me in building. And then I think, well, my luck will always work this way. And so I'm get less careful. Flip side of that is, if something goes bad, we go like, well, it will always go badly, and therefore I will quit. We're making the conclusion based on our limited experience, but you didn't do that. Talk about risk. What's necessary to really be successful in real estate investing? What's that look like?
Yeah. So I think in this game, like, everyone knows it's a long game. It's not a get rich quick scheme. I think the biggest thing where you can be successful here, or the biggest trait that you need to be successful, is resilience. You have to be stubborn. I think it's important for a lot of people. So many people are focused on the outcome, and I understand it. But if you look at any of the greats, the Michael Jordans of the world, the David Goggins, they focus on the inputs. They focus on the process, right? And when you focus on that, then the outcomes, you're going to have a much better probability at getting the outcome you want, because the output is a function of the inputs. And so if it works, awesome. But if not, and if you don't get the desired outcome, there's something to be said where the journey is more important, and it's probably more fruitful than the destination itself. Because once you get that destination, you get your 15 minutes of happiness and feeling of accomplishment. But then what, right? What's next? Where's your why? Where's your purpose in that? So you have to have some deeper motivation outside of just dollars and cents and spreadsheets. So to take risk, nothing is guaranteed. Like, full stop, nothing is guaranteed. Stock market, anything, any investment at all. And you, as I said earlier, you have to be willing to accept the fact that you might lose. So there's a component of risk tolerance. Are you risk averse? Are you open to risk? What is your diversification of assets? What is your current, what streams of income do you have? If you're working a 9 to 5, like a lot of your guests are, then what happens if things go wrong in the investment world? Can you still go on day to day, and you'll have a feeling of defeat perhaps, but hopefully it's a feeling of a lesson learned, and you can spin it. You'll have that, but are you crippled so much that you cannot move on, and you're going to go down the foreclosure route and all those kinds of things? So there is a component of calculation with it, but really I think it's just a matter of resilience and looking at the housing market over the last 100 years, and given one or two exceptions, it's done this each time.
And this is, you mentioned something in passing that I think has kind of gotten lost in the last 5 years in real estate investing, but this year I think people are waking up to, is that real estate is not a get rich quick thing. And that in itself is what I would call resulting. Is we look at this over, the COVID time, then we're like, awesome, things are going to appreciate it 20 to 30% a year. This is amazing. Everybody's going to get rich. Everybody has a TikTok channel where take my course. You're going to just like that flower is fading, right? But what it's fading to is what has more or less always been, which is work. It's the long game. One of my very first renters, actually he was a first renter in my first long-term place. He said, yeah, my parents are into real estate and they understand that, because I rented at a university, right? This is outside of university as a student. He says, my parents called real estate a get rich slow program. And I thought, that's a pretty cool way to think about it. And when we switch into the get rich quick, all of the things that go with get rich quick come with it. The additional risks, the assumptions, our disappointments, our expectations are set on something that real estate isn't. And I think it's interesting, Mike, that you are both working in real estate with your Airbnb arbitrage, because Kristi and I are both short-term rental hosts. It's work. It is work. If you think it's a set it and forget it, even if you have property managers, it is not. If you listen to this podcast and you think it's set it and forget it because you have somebody to manage it, go back and listen again. He's diversified in asset classes. He's diversified in geographical ways, in working for the income, for investing in the income. Plus, he's got the W-2. This is to mitigate. He talks a lot about taking risks, but he's also doing a lot of things to mitigate those risks. If that long-term rental doesn't positively cash flow this month, you don't have to give it back to the bank if you're $50 short, So I love it. This content has been absolutely outstanding. Just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. I mean, this was amazing, and there's so many more stories over the last few years. It's like you forget more than you remember at this point.
Yeah.
Some of the Airbnb other fails that I've had, and getting 6 single family homes last year and like really starting to get momentum with my partner Alfat in Columbus. There's so much to learn and unpack, but it really is a long game, just like you said, and it's a get rich slow thing. It really is. For anyone listening, like everything that I bought last year, the 6 homes combined, I think the cash flow is like $450 a month. And that's with no maintenance repairs, so you got to pick your strategy, right? So these are all burrs. So we're just going in with very little money in after the refinance, but there is effectively no cash flow from that, right?
Which makes a ton of sense because you have a W-2, you're playing the long game. You know that when you hang on to them, you're going to win. You'll get the tax advantages now to offset, and it makes total sense.
Exactly.
Having a partner is another part of the strategy of diversifying the risk, right? It's all of these things. Kristi and I did a podcast about knowing what game you're playing. And somebody might look at his game and go like, well, that's terrible. That's ridiculous. He's barely making 6 doors and $400 cash flow. That's terrible. But they don't realize what game you're playing, right? If he was playing the cash flow game, we're like, oh, that's not winning really, actually, for the amount of work. You'd definitely be doing as a Walmart greeter. But that's not the game you're playing. And so thank you for sharing this. This has been awesome.
Yeah, this is awesome. And Mike, I'm very grateful that you reached out on Bigger Pockets and we were able to enjoy Lake Tahoe and get to know each other, and spending time with you and your wife when we're back and hiking and talking more stories of crazy adventures and real estate and business and life has been awesome. So Erik, do you have any more questions before we wrap up here?
No, I just say thank you again. Mike, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on most social media platforms, just Mike Sgandurra. And then I'm on Instagram as Onevla Mike, Ohnevla Mike.
Awesome. Thank you for being our guest. And thank you for being our listeners. We want to share the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. That's why the Real Estate Pessimist podcast exists. And it wouldn't exist without our guests and without you listening. The highest compliment you could pay us if you've enjoyed this content is to leave us a review and share an episode with a friend. Spread the word that, yep, there's a real side to real estate investing. Thank you for joining us. Come back again for another one on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast.